using photos. I hope you are in the right room. I do very informal workshop. If you need to get up, move around and stretch, or stand up or whatever, feel free. I think you're going to be in front of him. So now we have one big circle, which I really wanted in the first place. This is good. Dennis, since you're my assistant, let her sit more center and move yourself over. All right. Control freak? Nah. Good morning. I need to check. Can you do me a favor? Go out to the registration desk, see if there is still a name tag for Bert Isaac. And if there is, tell him to come in as soon as he arrives. He's coming by ferry, I think. Thank you. Bert Isaac. Okay, Ed, we're starting. I'm being recorded in order to record the lecture. When we go into the experiential part after the coffee break, they will not be recording. This will not be on. I may leave it on while I explain the exercise. But once we start engaging and talking about the pictures, they are not recording. Guaranteed. It's just going to go off and go somewhere else, which was the only condition that I permitted it to happen. I have a little fan here because I have a very strange metabolism. So I've asked the room to get a little cooler. And if you start to get cold, tell me, because I won't know. Other than you'll be sitting there shivering. I want to talk today about counseling people who are dealing with addictions. And that's legal addictions and illegal addictions. You know, it's everything. I mean, you think of addict and you usually think of, could you close that door? And just leave it partially open, maybe with a chair in it or something, because addiction to me is where you are using, we've made one big circle, so just fit in somewhere. Can you guys just move over and give him a little bit more space? I'm going to be talking about addiction, and that is already defined selectively depending on who's doing the defining. We think of addiction and we think of drugs, drug addicts, but as I just sent Dennis out to try to find me coffee, I mean, any substance that alters the chemistry of your blood is a drug. Even if you think of it that way, it's food, it's minerals, it's anything. And addiction being the inability to stop using it. And hence, if they, we just sort of made a big circle, so come join. The fact that if they ever make coffee illegal, I would probably be in treatment. So I use a very, what do we do about this? Yeah, or we can just bring another table up. I tried to make it informal, and I think I goofed. I'm going to be talking about addiction, yes. I'll be talking about different definitions of it, and the fact that I am a psychologist and an art therapist, and I do counseling, which means I talk with people about what's bothering them within an intentional therapy framework. I may have them do things that perhaps they could do at home on their own, looking at pictures. We all do it. But I do it within a context and a framework where I have a plan, and I'm using the photos to help get me there. And the plan that I would have for the client would be based on what they think the problem is and what I think can be done about it, so that they learn how to do that for themselves the next time they have the problem, and they don't need me the next time. So all of the counseling, addiction, therapy, these all are words that have very selective meanings depending on how you define the process. They also have different meanings in different cultures. And I have worked for 30 years as a therapist, as a counselor, with a variety of people, 90% of which don't fit the norms that all these assessment tools and treatment programs are designed for. I work with people outside the mainstream. I work with people who are from different races, classes, genders, backgrounds. I work a lot in the Aboriginal community, the Native community. Are any of you from the States? Okay. Aboriginal is the same as you would call Native American. It's not Aborigine. I sometimes have to stop and explain. I work with people who are gay and lesbian. I work with people for the last 25 years who are infected or affected by HIV, the virus that's thought to cause AIDS. And most of those in the last 10 years have been people in our downtown east side, which is the Skid Row part of Vancouver, the highest rising rate of HIV in the developed world. And they're primarily Native. They're primarily street involved. A lot of them are homeless. A lot of them have addiction for reasons that might be a bit foreign to people with addictions to, you know, gambling or cigarettes or whatever. And what I want to try to do today in a half a day is give you what usually takes me 4 days of training to present. So I'm not training you, and this is not therapy. We're just going to talk about photos, how I use them to help me get to where I need to go with the client, how I use photos to help the client get themselves where they can learn about themselves without me around, and the reasons why, and give you a slide illustrated presentation about what I call phototherapy techniques, which is ways to use photos during therapy to assist the counseling that's going on. And in the second half, we're going to have a taste of what is it about photos that make them so useful in this work and so special. And you know, the quick answer is it's because it's not what the photo is about. It's not about what the photo is of. It's what the photo is about. What is the story that it tells? To whom and how? And what would have to change for it to be different? And what was happening in the picture? And why did you think that was such a good one to choose as the one that signals to you the most? And what does it say about you? And what would you change in it if you could? And all these sorts of things that we do instinctively around a dinner table looking at photos of parties or Christmas or whatever. We have photos on our computer desktops. We have photos on our cell phones, on our refrigerator doors. Photos are a ubiquitous part of our life. They're everywhere. And yet they hold secrets, incredibly powerful secrets about our lives, if only you know the right questions to ask. What phototherapy is not is I don't tell you what your photos mean. This is not photographic tea leaf reading or photographic tarot. Those things exist, but I use photos in a variety of ways, and in everything I do, it has to do with the meaning that is projected onto the image by the viewer, including the person who's taking the photo. So, you know, if I look at a photo, the meaning that I tell you is in this picture is coming from me, not the picture. The picture holds the trigger, the stimulus object. The story that's created is phenomenologically created in the interface between the person and the image. This one's a particularly good one. For those of you listening to this on CD, it is blank. So this is sort of an overview. I want to talk to you, I mean, you're here for a conference around meaning, spirituality, and addiction. Assuming you have a pretty good grasp of addiction, or you can get that through the rest of the conference. I'm not doing a workshop on addiction. I'm doing a workshop on using photos as techniques, helping people with addictions. So there won't be a whole lot of content on addiction. There will be a lot of content about meaning and spirituality, in that a lot of the things that happen around photos and the interactions with them sometimes are rather majorly synchronistic, and they can bring forth a whole lot about the underlying value system of the person who's talking to you. While they think they're talking about the photo, you get into some really basic values, some very basic beliefs, some very basic concepts such as faith and trust and hope and meaning. And I'm not talking religion here, I'm talking spirituality, very different, especially in the Aboriginal communities where I work. And I need to explain also, I'm not Native. I only go where I'm asked. I don't decide to go help those poor Native people. They don't need me. They're fine without me. But basically that a lot of the work that I do around healing is very much founded on what I've learned in the last 20 years of working in those communities, particularly around the balance that is health, and that if one part of our system is out of whack, that it affects the rest of it, and sometimes the best way to deal with addictions is not deal with the addiction, to deal with rebalancing the life around it so that maybe the addiction doesn't serve as big a purpose at meeting needs as it used to. Change has to come from inside out. I cannot go up to someone and say, you have to stop smoking, you have to stop using cocaine. Force meets resistance. It's very simple. The best way is to get the person to have a little seed of hope, a little bit of doubt that maybe things could be better if they weren't doing this, and that maybe if they take it into small enough steps, they can actually do it. They can get past this. Trying to find what is the need that the addiction is meeting, and try to find other ways to get it met. Sounds very Pollyanna and very simple, but you know what? It's actually worked many, many times with the people I've been working with. You'll see some slides. I need to explain also, just for protocol, the public part of this is being recorded. Anything that you say in the first half will be on the tape unless you specifically ask me to turn the mic off, at which point I will. In the second half, once you start talking, the mic is off. But anything that I say while we're being recorded that you think might be a little bit giving someone's story or showing you photos, every picture you're seeing in here and on my slides and in my book have signed releases on file, permissions given. Anybody's story that I'm telling you is illustration, I have written permission to tell the story. There's times they've asked me to change their name, and there's times they haven't. So just so that you're comfortable, if I go on, I'm going to show you some pretty powerful slides, I think. And if I start talking about somebody who, you know, used to be an addict or whatever, he could be sitting here in the room and it's fine. Anything that goes on in the second half particularly, I'd like that to be confidential. I'd like it to stay in this room. These things, I don't want to scare you. This stuff works really deep and really quickly and really powerfully, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if people were in tears occasionally. Sometimes I am. But just that you need the security that whatever you hear in here will stay in here. I'd like that honored, please. I would like to put around a name and address. I have an assistant. I haven't had an assistant in a workshop in years. Dennis, would you start a name and address, name and email, and geographic columns. He likes tidy. So Dennis, left is name, then is email, and then is geographic area. And what that is I want you to tell me what areas, if I'm teaching in California or Italy or Surrey or whatever, where you want to be notified if I'm doing workshops. And I go all over the world doing this. I just taught in northern Italy in January, Sweden, Finland, the year before, England, probably Mexico, possibly Korea, possibly Latvia, not sure this year. So that's some background. Also, I want to orient you as to what's here so that we can just get started. I have a business card, which you can have if you want, but my assistant will pass these around, or just take one and pass them. You don't have to go walking around the room each time. This is a giant business card, and the reason I did this is it's got not only the usual stuff, name, address, email, phone, fax, but it also has the website called PhotoTherapy Techniques in Counseling and Therapy. That website is a small book. It has pages on the techniques, the history, the chronology, my publications, all of which can be downloaded for free, except my book. Every article I published, and there's about 5 book chapters and about 30 articles on both phototherapy and HIV counseling. There's a page of recommended readings. There's a page comparing phototherapy and therapeutic photography, which I'll speak more about later. There's a page called Who's Doing What, Where. There's probably close to 100 little paragraphs on there, people all over the world that are doing this and what they're doing with their email address. There's a links page. There's a list of student theses and dissertations on this subject of phototherapy. And there is a phototherapy discussion group, which is this other link, which you can get to from my site, but if you want to go directly. The discussion group is for you guys. I don't post there very often. There's about 300 messages there now from, last time I counted 15 countries. There's people all over the world doing this. Some with addictions, some with child abuse, some with geriatric, schools, therapy, whatever. People are writing to each other, and it's wonderful stuff. There's no charge to post a message. And there's a search box on that page. So if you're particularly interested in, say, addictions with teenagers who are doing, whatever, alcohol, whatever, you can put alcohol teens and search, and it'll bring up every message in that entire page, that website, that has that in the title or the content. So this is your little guide. The other handouts I will give you as we go, these are not handouts. This table is not handouts. They're samples of some of the photo and photo art combinations. The stuff on the right are some of the things that have happened in the downtown east side part of Vancouver, where people who are living with addictions, who also have a life, have been doing things with cameras and photos to try to take back more power over their life, get a sense of identity, a bit of ability to make change in the world. Some very powerful stuff produced as, the downtown east side who we are calendar and various things like that you might want to look at. I do have my book here. They are selling it out there. You can buy it or not. I make $5 a book. I really don't care if you buy it or not. But it is basically a written down workshop. It's very practical. It's very simple English. There's a chapter on each technique with a list of questions on getting started yourself. These in here look different than those out there because this is the last batch of the second edition, and that is the third. They are identical in content, and I'm giving a cheaper price in here, and that's okay with the guy out there. So if you want the book and you want $5 off, you can get it in here. It's the last I'm going to say about my book. Now, who are you? Very briefly, where are you from? Who are you? Why are you here in this room? Do you already do this? And maybe you have things to share with people.
I just started working with seniors who have addictions about a month ago.
Okay.
And I am also wrapping up my diploma in art therapy.
Okay.
So phototherapy came up naturally with my clients. It was something that happened the first session. Because I do outreach and I go to their homes. So I was delighted when I saw this.
Me and say, oh, I thought I invented this. I've been doing this for 20 years. Who are you? And it's fine with me. I don't own this. I thought in 1975, I published my first article. And I thought, I published. And I'm going to be famous. And a year later, I got an invitation to the International Phototherapy Symposium in Chicago. It took all the wind right out of my balloon. But it was a wonderful trade because there was about 20 people from 4 countries, all who've been doing this, all of whom thought they invented it. It was all very funny. And we've been a family ever since. This is a field where it is not like your typical professional territorial, I did this before you, you can't have it. This is more like, one day I had a workshop and it turned out I couldn't be there because my mother had passed away. And I called someone else in another city to go do the workshop for me. There are people who do this. I have pioneered it. These are my techniques. I have trained many people. If I've trained them well, they're perfectly welcome to go do it. So the fact that it came to you naturally just means it's a natural field, and good for you. Yeah. There's a whole lot on my website in the recommended readings page and the links page around people working with geriatrics, including Sunnybrook Hospital, Toronto, a whole thing with the veterans and scanning in their old photos and telling stories and okay.
I'm Beth, and I'm actually an accountant, and I'm going to school to be a counselor.
Excellent. Told you you had to be here.
Yeah.
Does your friend know me or has been at these before? Or?
I just chose this work.
Okay. Yeah. Well, leave if it gets bored. I won't be offended. Okay.
My name is Donna Levins, and the reason I'm here.
Fine. We all start that way.
All in the book.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested for a variety of reasons, and I'm excited to.
Good.
Okay, I'm Alexander Batjani from Vienna, Austria, and I'm working at the Viktor Frankl Institute.
Say that again. You're working at the.
Viktor Frankl.
Oh, excellent. I didn't know that.
It was founded actually by Viktor Frankl and his colleagues in order to, secure his work and so on. And when I'm a lecturer,
He's speaking here.
No. I enjoy being here, and that's the PQ workshop, because it's on the same shape.
Frankl termed this new syndrome as existential frustration. The vacuum manifests itself in indifference, boredom, apathy, despondence, and dissatisfaction with life. In big, bold letters I have printed, this feeling of meaninglessness is usually accompanied by a feeling of inner emptiness, which Frankl termed existential vacuum. Recent research has shown that this syndrome can have dangerous consequences, among them depression, aggression, and importantly enough, addiction. Indeed, according to a number of empirical studies, and this is bright yellow with a big star next to it, feelings of meaninglessness are strong and important mediating factors, and sometimes the single most decisive factors in substance abuse disorders. At the same time, another set of studies shows that a renewed sense of purpose and meaning can help even severely addicted patients on their road to recovery. The renewed sense of purpose and meaning that can help people on their way to recovery is what this whole morning is about. And now those two paragraphs were written by him. And this is what he's talking about later in this conference. So this is why I was so happy that you were in here. Enough ego. Okay. Next.
I'm Ron Anderson, and I'm from Minnesota. I'm a retired professor of sociology. And I'm a semi-professional photographer.
That's things I want to make sure to answer. Okay. By the way, how many of you actually have professional or semi-professional photography backgrounds? You may find this difficult because I'll be talking about photography as communication rather than photography as art. And those who have had training in, composition, zone, law thirds, the art part of photography often get frustrated because this works just as well with photocopies of photos or imaginary photos or remembered photos. And I know often your assignment in the back of the room will be find a photo that particularly calls to you. I'm going to ask you to try to do that without going to it because of the artistic beauty of it or whatever. It's hard sometimes to disengage that, so have fun. Also, I'm very interested in your background in sociology. I think the reason that I am the kind of therapist that I am, and I'll take that in a minute, the kind of therapist that I am is that I had, my master's is in counseling. My bachelor's is in psychology and anthropology with a minor in sociology. And I think the anthropology part has been very important in my work. People like Edward Hall and people who are talking about the selective perception, the ethnocentrism, the egocentrism, the fact that we don't all see things the same way and yet we walk around in the world thinking that we do, and how that affects therapy. It's a lot of stuff we don't always get in psychology training. So I do sign language, so if you see me doing something weird, I'm holding a thought here that I can get back to by seeing the symbol. So I sign for deaf, and so if I'm doing something like this while I'm talking to you, it's all right. Figure that one out on the CD. No, I'm not. It could get creative, though. And I said with my background, I should explain, I am a registered psychologist, which is the same as licensed in the States. I'm in the Canadian Registry of Health Service Providers in Psychology. That's the highest you can do in terms of being qualified. But I do not have a PhD, and I don't want to be seen as representing myself as having one, because when I got licensed as a psychologist, I'm old, so when I got licensed as a psychologist, back in the days, you could have a master's and you didn't need the PhD. I'm also a licensed art therapist in the US, registered art therapist. The American Art Therapy Association has a license. The Canadian has an optional one, so I haven't bothered. But I'm coming to you from both backgrounds. And I also was a gallery exhibiting photographer and do sell my work. And it's being in the galleries that got me started in this in the mid-70s. In the mid-70s, I had my photos in a gallery. And I went in and I heard, "Martha, look at that." "What, George?" "That woman pulling down her trousers like that to show us her tattoo in that picture over there, that's just absolutely obscene." It's like my photo. Never thought of that someone could see it that way. I got really fascinated about what are people seeing when they're looking at the photos I think I know so well. And this projective component, I call it photoprojectives, underlies even when you look at your own pictures of your dog. You're still projecting the meaning onto the image. So again, the background's in all three fields. Visual sociology, visual anthropology associations, there's a big overlap here. Next.
My name is R.Psych. I'm a addiction therapist working in Dublin.
My name is Barb Keith, and I'm a clinical supervisor at the Aboriginal Wellness Program in Vancouver. And my background is in social work. And the reason that I came to this is, I think, looking at different tools, and particularly visual tools, are very strong within the Aboriginal community.
Oh, yeah.
Be very important.
And the fact that both art and therapy, those words mean very different things, and especially in a culture where the art was never separate in the first place. The reason I sent Dennis out to look for Bert Isaac, who I thought was coming, is many years ago, Bert had me do something for the Kwakwakwa Suicide Support Group, where we did a bunch of photos. And I've also done this up in the Gitxsan territory, where whatever it's called, Gitxsan Health, the home support workers. You can get in with photos in a way that you can't any other way. So it's good to have you here.
Hi, my name is Candice, and I'm a high school guidance counselor in Winnipeg. And I also volunteer at a drop-in counseling center in Whistler as well.
Which one?
Clinic, again.
Okay. Because I know people who started the 9 Directions there. Now, there was just a conference in Winnipeg on spirituality and meaning. Were you at that in last March? Because I did a whole day workshop there.
I go to a lot of the Aboriginal conferences
Right.
because I'm very involved with that in the school,
Yeah.
but not sure if I was at that.
That's okay. A colleague of mine, Albert McLeod, did a thing on a healing model for addictions at it. So, anyway, okay.
I'm Dennis.
He's my assistant.
I was originally born here in Canada, and I studied in Singapore for a master's degree. And while in Singapore, I Googled the meaning of life, the meaning of love, and things like that. And it hit on this conference, which the Wallers are organizing. I saw my home Coquitlam, BC. So I emailed him and said, help my dad, he visits me, because he looks like my dad.
Oh, that's guilt. That works well.
Yeah, so anyways, that's what happened. And when I came back, he said, would you like to help out at a conference? I said, sure.
Excellent. So you're actually living in Singapore
Right now.
right now?
I'm on break.
Okay. There's a group of A.T.R family therapists in Singapore very interested in phototherapy and just can't quite get it organized to bring me, but I might be going there. So I'll give you the woman's name. It's Eva Lim, and I'll give you her contact info later. Okay. Well, I have a better picture of who's in here.
Excuse me,
Hmm?
can I ask a question? Since
Are
I'm
you-
not from
You can
Australia,
always do that, yeah.
What is Aboriginal
Oh, Aboriginal.
in Canada? I mean,
Aboriginal? Okay.
I'm very sorry, but I didn't know
That's
that.
all right. It's probably not my place to answer that, but I'll give it a try, and other people can help me. Latin, in Latin, original, as of the original. So in Canada,
Yes.
the people who are native choose to call themselves what they think is best, and they ask us to respect that terminology. You either have First Nations, which leaves out the Métis and the Inuit people, or you have Aboriginal, which means we were here before anybody ever came. We were here. We didn't immigrate from somewhere. We've been here. We are the original people. In America, in the United States, people call themselves Native Americans. But there's a political statement in calling yourself a Native Canadian when, in fact, you really got invaded by this country that decided to call itself Canada. That politics notwithstanding, I'm not taking a stance here, I'm just telling you my understanding of the perception is we're the original people, so we call ourselves Aboriginal. What happens is the people who know people in Australia who are Aboriginal people of Australia are choosing to call themselves Aborigine, which in their language has, most Native nations name for themselves means the people. I'm adopted into a Lakota family, which you might know as Sioux people. Lakota means the people. That's what it means. So Aboriginal means the people who've always been here. So in my work in the communities, I prefer to use it. Now, I can stand correction here if it's relevant or additional comment. I mean, there are people here who are either from or working with that world. So
That's fairly close to how I understand it.
okay. So, but that's why, because I'll talk in the States and say, Aborigine people in Canada? How'd they get there? So, all right, I need to get started because we've been going a long time here. I looked at who's talking during this conference, and both yours and Stanton Peel's really impressed me. I think we're all on the same track in many ways that, first of all, addiction is a problem only if it's a problem. And whether it's legal or illegal is sometimes the problem. Being unable to stop it is sometimes the problem. But you get into some very delicate issues around clean drugs with a clean needle by someone who's not street involved is going on all the time. And is that addiction? Is it physical addiction? Is it emotional addiction? I worked for the British Columbia alcohol and drug programs for the first 8 years of my employment here. I moved here in 1973. And for those of you who can hear accents, yes, I used to be in the States. But for my entire work in the alcohol and drug programs, I worked with people who smoked, drank coffee, and drank on the weekends as my co-therapist. So for me, addiction is a relative term. The damage it does, the crime it produces by being sociologically in the position that it's in, the damage it does to human beings and their families, I'm definitely concerned about. But I'm using a very broad sense of addiction here because in the community I work with, the despair and the hopelessness that has come out of their economic situation, their historical abuses, and I'm not talking just Aboriginal, the residential school definitely fits. I'm talking kids who grew up in homes where parents beat each other or rape their children, or parents are too busy working, they don't give their kids quality time. All of these sorts of things can lead to a person who's lost their sense of hope, who does not know their purpose or concept of their purpose, and who doesn't understand the meaning of their life. And they're wandering around aimlessly, and they're looking for something to get them in a place where they don't hurt so much. People don't do drugs because it makes them feel bad. People do drugs because it makes them feel good in a way they can't get to for free. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paying money for it. It's very simple facts. I work with people who use drugs to either remove pain or make themselves happy because they don't know how to do that naturally. Either they're too afraid of so many fears all overwhelming them at once that they can't get past it. They don't understand that if you work with them one at a time, it's like letting the steam out of a pot on the stove, a little bit at a time, you can do it. If you keep the lid down too high, it blows up. Many people, when they're using, it's the only time they show their feelings, risk showing their feelings, risk even knowing they have feelings, and even risk knowing that they have a right to have feelings. Most of the people I work with, it's not safe to show your feelings. It's risky. The feelings are usually bad ones. They don't know how to resolve all those underlying issues, those unconscious things that are keeping them from breathing freely in their world. And as one of the people downtown, a poet named Bud Osborne said, once you start letting people start caring about you, it means you have to start caring about yourself, and that is really scary. So these are my guys. Okay? Now, disempowered people are those whose voices have been silenced and whose existence is given little recognition, even in silence. As they have had no influence on how the world runs, they're seen to make no difference in society, and thus they're often seen not to be there. The consequences of this are central issues, though often unconscious ones, for marginalized or devalued individuals, and they frequently prompt people to seek therapists to help them getting more in charge of their lives. This can be true for races, cultures, groups based on disability, gender, economic status, and so forth. but it also can be equally true inside the mini society of family, where emotional orphans live side by side with other family members who knowingly or unknowingly oppress them, usually while they're children. Often the consequences are that not only has their voice and feelings become silenced, but they often no longer recognize they have a voice at all or have the right to take it back. Page 124. So that's sort of my background. I covered addictions. I want to talk about phototherapy now. If you stop to think about it, a photograph is a rather curious thing. It's a very thin piece of paper that we perceive three-dimensionally as if it's alive and as if it's existing right now. The moment we look at inside its border is now. We're there, within the space and time of that image, as if physically there ourselves. Our mind doesn't separate viewing the visual contents of photos from viewing the visual facts themselves. It's a transitional object that bridges without our even realizing this is happening. Looking at a photo of our relatives 100 years ago, we conceptually process that image as if we are seeing them alive in front of us at that moment. And we're right there, across from them, looking at them. Our mind achieves a cognitive leap that equates looking at the photo with being in the actual scene itself. Thus we feel certain that the camera did not and could not lie, because it obviously took a picture. For all those who are writing, this is page 4 of my book. You can come copy it later. Thus we feel certain that the camera did not and could not lie, because it obviously took a picture of what was happening right there, right then, in front of it. Except the camera didn't take a picture. The person did. Someone told me once a photo was paper with emotion spread all over it. And of course he meant emulsion, but the malapropism stayed with me. Photographs are indeed emotionally charged, as if electromagnetically etched with emotions. And we can never view even our own personal photos dispassionately. In fact, these small pieces of paper are empowered far beyond their apparent value. Their significance resonates to and from people who take or view them, but over the past and far into the future even. Emotions connected to the subject matter become transferred to the photographic representation of that subject as a type of stand-in for the real person, place, or thing. So it's natural that we view these things, these artifacts, as if they were full of life. A photograph then has a special quality of being simultaneously a realistic illusion and an illusory reality. A moment captured, yet never fully captured. We use film to stop time, which cannot be stopped. The aspects are crucial for an understanding of why and how phototherapy works. It permits the complex examination of a slice of time frozen on film as fact, and yet simultaneously allows an endless variety of realities to be revealed as each viewer responds to it differently. Every photo has stories to tell, secrets to share, questions to ask, and memories to bring forth. The person who takes a picture is trying to make a permanent record of a special moment. It's special because the perceiver thinks it's special. Perhaps nobody else would. If the picture turns out right, it's because it satisfies the photographer's expectation. If it doesn't, he or she won't keep it. Or at least they'll know in their minds what was missing or maybe what went wrong and needs changing. The photos that people take or collect as postcards, magazine pages, greeting cards, etc., can tell something about them by virtue of the fact that they chose those to respond to. They were taken or gathered because they mattered. As a collection, they constitute almost a mirror reflection of their owner, in that we don't usually keep photos around that we don't like or don't matter. The ones that are most special to us express many things about us and our life that we might explain, or that we might not realize till we look at them later. We only need to be asked good exploratory questions about the photos in our hands. When people pose for photos, even those they take of themselves, they have certain ideas about how they should look in the final picture. These reflect their expectations about how they should be perceived by other people in real life. Asking them questions about photos of themselves can be a good way to find out how they evaluate themselves. The visual contents of the photographic image itself are important, but it is the meaning of those contents to each person who encounters them that gives therapeutic potential. A photo will mean very differently to the person who took it, to each person in it, whether posed or captured unaware. Any person who looks at it later, whether or not they know the subject matter in the photo or the photographer, and certainly any person who keeps it as part of a permanent collection, or more importantly, possibly a family album. Family albums have their own private lives and reasons for existence, and I'll interrupt myself here to say family albums are personal narratives. And for those of you who are trained in narrative therapy, there is a huge braid going on, which I can talk to at some time. It's a topic on itself. Words in sentences, sentences in paragraphs, paragraphs on pages, page after page. Those things are linear stories. So are photos on pages, pages in albums. Very similar. They tell stories. They're rearranged differently, the story changes. Frequently, in phototherapy process, clients' explanations of the meaning of a snapshot, what it's about, what it is, turn out to be far less significant than their explanations of why they know that's true. This is back to Frankel, I think. It's not just, oh, that's a picture of a horse, it makes me remember my childhood, it makes me think of good times, but why does it do that? And it is the why where the therapist goes into action. And that is one of the major differences between just using photographic activities in personal healing to explore yourself and doing it within an intentional therapy framework where the therapist says, and why do you think that might be? And what would have to change in it for it to be different? Because this is clues about you. Let's talk about this. How do you know? How do you know what you know? Basic epistemology. It's not just, I know that, but where is that coming from deep inside of you at an unconscious level? Because your expectations of yourself and other people are what you measure life by and whether or not you're disappointed. Your expectations, your disappointments reflect your expectations. Your expectations reflect your inner value system that's 99% unconscious. How you know what you know. How you make the different differentiations that you do. The differences that make a difference and don't. So no matter, clients' explanations of the meaning of the snapshot turn out to be far less significant than their explanations of why what they know is true and how that they know this is true. A lot can be revealed as a person delves into what a photo is about emotionally as well as what it shows visually. No matter how large the photograph, it's never more than a detail of an even larger picture in life, in space and time. Its significance grows as we learn more about its context. Clients who are able to regard their photographs as starting points rather than end products, and who can use them to initiate questions and explore feelings, can learn a great deal about themselves in the process. Now, I've just read 2 pages of my book. That's about the only reading I'm going to do to you, but I go off on tangents in case you haven't noticed it yet. So I wanted to read the 2 pages very linearly because this is the foundation for phototherapy. Those of you who are trained in, narrative therapy, drama therapy, play therapy, any of the body therapies, these techniques greatly overlap. For example, if I am holding, a photo, it has borders. Imagine any of the photos that you respond to later, taking the borders, stretching, stepping over the bottom one and getting into the picture and looking around in there. And looking back at the photographer, and maybe why did the photographer take the picture? Did they get what they wanted? Here's the picture. Put it on a sheet of art paper that's this big, and draw the rest of the picture that this was cropped from. Have a photocopy of yourself and enlarge it to fit in that picture. I mean, these things become very creative. Phototherapy techniques, there are 5 basic ones, and I'll explain them very quickly. Are not just look at pictures. Active assignments during therapy, homework assignments. Go out and come back with a roll of film if this was the last roll of film on earth. I mean, I have a whole list of questions here, that's one of your handouts, of what I would do in terms of talking to addicts. that are trying to solve their problem and coming to a therapist voluntarily, go photograph, the me nobody knows. Go photograph your addiction. Go photograph, find a photo that reminds you of what life could be like if you're not addicted. This came out of my mind last night. These are just things I thought I'd mention to you. There's thousands of them. Phototherapy is a set of 5 techniques based on the person-photo interaction. They are not done in a fixed list, in a certain order, in a certain way, the way Judy Weiser says, or you go to jail. It's not simple. They're techniques. What I just was doing over here with the walking around is hypnosis. A lot of this, and I'm trained in clinical hypnosis, a lot of this is you're in hypnosis with your image. You'll be in it later. If I ever shut up and show you your slides. It's hypnosis. It's Jungian. It's archetypal. It's Gestalt empty chair, you in the photo having a conversation. These techniques are tools. I use a glass when I need to drink water. I use a fan when I want to be cool. I use a pen when I want to write. You use photos of the client when you want to do Like, there's purposes for each of the techniques, but you will be using them very creatively in your own way. So I'm going to give you the map, but it's not the territory. The map is photos of the client, photos by the client, photos of the client by the client, which we call self-portraits. I was being silly. Photo of the client, photo by the client, photo of the client by the client, self-portrait. Family, photobiographical kinds of photos, and I separate those out for a reason, and I'll explain later. And the 5th one, and it's like a hand, because these are fingers, of, by, self, and album. But the 5th one is like the thumb, without which the hand cannot work. And this really is an integrated system. The thumb is photoprojective, and I have to separate that out as a technique in order to teach it, which is what we're going to do in the back of the room. But really, when I look at a picture of myself, I'm projecting the meaning. When I'm looking at an album, it's a photo of or by the client. They all interweave. It's an interrelated system. And for those of you, systems theory, cybernetics systems theory, family systems, A.T.R, Bowen, at the heart of this work. In fact, there's a quote by A.T.R on the back of my book. She really liked this stuff. This is systemic. You change one thing, it alters the rest of it. Sound like addictions and recovery and families that sabotage? So I'm going to start a slideshow, because if I don't, it's not going to happen. And I need to find this. It's going to be a visual. Mr. Assistant, would you move the slide projector back? And I'm just trying to, just pick up the whole table without stepping on the skirt. That's enough. And those of you who are there might have to move, because I want to make this bigger. So something's not going. I think I'm standing on it. Yeah, okay. And lights, please. Photo of the client is 2 kinds. By the way, here's your whole lecture. You don't need me now. This is it's not just the picture, it's what you do with it. That's great. Photo of the client can be, if I'm taking a picture of you, I'm either getting the you that you are normally, or you're posing. So a picture of you could be your posing behavior or your natural behavior. And how interesting to compare the 2 kinds of photos. What do you like when you know you're being watched, when you're talking to your social worker or whatever? Like, who are you when you're posing, and who are you when somebody going by with a camera gets your picture and you don't know? Photos by you also are 2 kinds. I take the picture, or I take the picture. Photos that you create by shooting them, photos that you collect or appropriate, which in a lot of art therapy work is important because you rework images with collage, photocopying, Photoshop, Computers are amazing. I mean, you have to understand, I wrote this book in 1993 on a 512 Mac. There was no Photoshop, there were no scanners. So, I mean, the work that's being done now, especially by younger kids, the kids, pardon me, the younger generation, the 20-year-olds or so, that are coming into the therapy field full of energy, full of creative ideas, they're just blowing my mind because there's all kinds of things there. Cell phone pictures. There is a Japanese Phototherapy Association that is primarily working on cell phone photos, never mind paper. The world is changing very quickly, especially in these media. So, I'm going to show you a series of photos, and this is a standard package slide tray. I want you, just as you're looking at these, to think about what's the story of this picture? How did it come to be taken? And why? And I'm just going to go through these. I'm not going to talk. I usually discuss this, but we're going to do that for half an hour or so at the end. So some of these, the slides aren't working well. But I'm just going to shut up now and show you pictures. What's their relationship? Why'd the photographer take this? What's going on in there? As you tell me about it, I hear what matters to you, the differences that make a difference in your world, how you would feel if that was a picture of you, which is what we automatically do. What would he say to her? What would she say to him? My best therapy technique with phototherapy is pretend I'm from Mars and I don't understand that. Tell me more so I understand it better. She looks this way. Well, what do you mean? Tell me more. As people try to help you understand the picture, you're learning about them. And they know it, and it's still all right. What happened here? What is this a picture of? What's it a picture about? Quick example. Every one of these, I usually do 2-day intro workshops and 4-day trainings. Doing this in a half a day is very difficult. Each of these has stories. I can't tell you all of them. But just for this particular example, a family that I was treating, the father said, "Oh, it looks like she forgot to set the brakes." The daughter said, because the son, the teenage son, "Don't worry about level, it's all right, tidy man." We were talking before, and Dennis is a lot more tidy than I am. Straight lines and things being all in nice, neat piles. That drives him crazy. The teenage son had attempted suicide. The whole family was in for counseling. Parents' relationship poor. Kid, my hunch from a systems perspective is that if we fixed the kids, the parents would probably divorce. So it was a very interesting dynamic in the family. But Dad said, "Looks like she forgot to set the brakes." Sister said, "It's a wall of frozen anger. It has to be taken apart brick by brick. And if my brother could do that, he could stay alive." Showing this in a workshop, I had a woman, and this whole story is in the book if you want the whole thing, but a woman said, at first I thought it was a woman's body. I saw this image of 2 legs and blood flow, like pubic hair and blood flow. But then I looked at it reversal, figure ground, and so I looked at the empty, like the white shape at the top, and it looked like a map of southern Africa. And I'm not sure which drew me to this, because I was a missionary in southern Africa for a few years, in Zimbabwe. And in fact, the name Zimbabwe translates to house of stone. These things build, the stories go on. So. Now, I have a series of these. Does this thing focus? No, all right. I'm gonna go stand or sit over here. This is a small series of, I work with people who don't fit the norms, who aren't trained in all the cultural correct, politically correct, etc. I work with people who are sometimes learning disabled, who have all kinds of other problems. And often the world does not make sense to them. And I have a series of slides that I use that present to you how they sometimes have to see the world. I have not created these with Photoshop. This is the way they look. I'm trying to be short. Can you all see? Can you see? You sure? So if you look around, you see things that other people see that they find puzzling. Some humor is culturally selective. This is the marker at the cemetery where my mother is buried. The sign says dead end. Some people find it humorous, some don't. In Germany, the no dogs are no dachshunds. So, you know, a lot of this is culturally selective, and I claim that we all see reality that way. Human beings are sense makers. We must try to figure things out. It's very difficult for people to see things like this and not try to figure out what's going on. We try to figure things out, and we use the map inside our heads to filter what matters, what doesn't, what makes sense, what doesn't. And photos are things that we do the same thing to photos as we do to people. So the way that we would decide, for instance, which one of these people is a teacher, which one of these people is deaf, which one of these people is gay, which one of these people is in a wheelchair. And because I know the people, I can tell you every one of those is true. There are people up there who are that way. If I spent time with you saying, which one of those people is deaf? You know, how do you know? And it's how you know that I want to know about. I don't care if you're right or wrong. That doesn't matter. Which, for your population, which one of these people went to residential school? Which one of them is status and not? You know, you filter your questions according to the therapeutic goal you're doing. Now, photos of you. Posing. We have posing behaviors. I'm here. You know, in this, I saw this when I travel a lot. People, they have the rules, not only individual about what they want, but cultural. We see photos in newspapers or media, and we forget that they've been not only filtered for us, but in terms of advertising, they probably had focus groups to find out what really attracts people to buy things. Then there is the photo, and then there is what the people do with it when they print it. For instance, the newspaper editors, you know, this person took a photo of this man who was the new manager of the Hyatt Regency that year. And the photographer went to photograph the man for the newspaper article. And this is the photo that appeared in our local newspaper, Ted Theobald of the Hyatt Regency with his family. Now, this is why I can't read people's photos for them. I can't say he loves his cat more than his wife, because it's too simplistic. You get these books like Robert Ackerett's book called Photo Analysis, Michael Lessie's books on family albums, and it's like, find out how to, it's like the National Enquirer. Find out why Lady Di knew she was gonna get killed 4 months earlier. Look at this picture where she's touching her, or whatever. Did the photographer tell them where to sit? Or did they sit there naturally? Is a crucial question to my reaction to this photo. If the guy said, ma'am, you and the daughter sit in the back, and sir, you come up here, then that's a photo by the photographer, but it may not be the natural behavior of the family. If it is the natural behavior of the family, I'm glad they are not my clients. You know, it's like, this is why when somebody hands you a photo, one of your first questions has got to be, did you do this spontaneously, or did somebody tell you to do it? You know, were there 7 other pictures of this same moment and you've only brought me this one? You know, very important questions. 2 friends of mine, and what's really interesting is this is an illustration of photo. He had, the fellow on the right had to hide this photo when his parents came to visit because they didn't know he was gay. That's in my book. They didn't mind that, but I had to remove the logo of the shirt where the guy worked before he let me use the photo. I mean, people have very selective things about what matters in photos. When I first started counseling in the mid-70s, I worked with Aboriginal children who were in foster care in the city in order to go to school. This young lady was from Klimtu, if you happen to know the family. She was about 7 years old, supposedly totally deaf, very badly burned in a fire when she was little, brought down to the city for medical care, and lived with her grandmother and went to school here rather than going back to her village because it's a very isolated community. She could not have services in sign language. She couldn't hear, and they wanted her to be educated, so her grandmother came down and she lived with her grandmother. She had very little understanding of facial affect. There were basically two faces. There was this, and there was this. And when people looked at her and they went like this, you know, I mean, I could tell it's probably they don't have their glasses on. You know, it's low light and I can't see you. I'm not frowning at you. But she would misunderstand what the faces were doing. So this is one of the more active kind of things. We made emotion cards, feelings. She put it under her chin. We took pictures. She would later go to the mirror and see if she could match the face, or she'd cover the picture and look at the word and see if the other kid in the house could make the right face. And we made a game out of it. Board she was fine at. Photos of you spontaneously taken, very different than photos of you when you're posed. Imagine if you asked, what's the story of this? Fully dressed in a bathtub. You'd get not only the stories, you'd also, it's important to know, why are you showing me these photos? If you know who those people are, you'll understand why it's an important photo. If you don't know who that is, you would wonder. Photos of you taken at light and happy moments, sometimes in retrospect have sort of different meaning. I say when I teach and in my book that sometimes we take photos and we don't know why until later. There are many examples in my life. If this was a longer workshop, I could tell you stories, but where you look at a photo now and then 20 years later you look back with, oh my God, it was in there all the time and I never even realized. This happens